Saram, brothers and sisters, I pronounce the Swami's lotus feet.
We are here with David Pacek. David, if you would start anywhere, we are all ears. We'd love to hear a story from you.
I want to start where we found Swami, where Swami found us, basically. And we were living in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. I was working at the King Faisal Specialist Hospital. And one day, a friend of mine that worked in the office, a colleague, he was a Saudi, he was giggling and laughing at the desk next to me. And I said, Banjar, what are you laughing at? He said, well, I'm not don't worry about nothing. So he kept this giggling and laughing going on for about a half hour. And I asked him a second time, what are you laughing at? And he came real quietly over to my desk and sat down and he said, well, I'm going to tell you what I was laughing about after everybody in the office leaves and goes on coffee break. He said, but I don't want you to tell anybody why I told you this story or what the story is. I said, yeah, my word, no problem. So he went back to his desk, and when everybody went over to the cafeteria on break, he came over and he said, well, there's this guy at the front gate trying to get into the hospital, the guard gate, and they won't let him in. And he said, and then he started laughing. I said, what's so funny? He said, well, the guy says he's God. I said, well, I'm thinking, well, the guy's probably not all there. But I didn't say anything. I said, I don't find that funny, Banjar. He said, you probably don't know this, but he said, I'm a Sunni, and the Shiite religion, which is the other sect of the Muslim faith, they have what was written by Muhammad's followers. And he said, they talk about when God is going to come to earth. And I said, well, what is it? He said, well, he's going to have first of all, he's going to be short, and he's going to have an orange robe on and lots of hair. And the guy at the gate is kind of tall. He's got a white robe, and he's got a beard. When God comes, he's supposed to be clean shaven. I said, well, this is really interesting. I said, what else is this about? What other attributes does he have? And he said, well, he's going to have a mole on his cheek, a space between his teeth, and he's going to give people small gifts. I said, well, that's really interesting. I said, is he here? He says, not that I know of. I said, when is he coming? We have no idea. I said, where's he going to be? He said, we read the scriptures in the book, and we think, according to the vegetation in what was written, we're pretty certain it's going to be either Pakistan or India. I said, well, when is he coming? I asked him again, and he said, we don't have any idea. I said, well, that's really interesting, Banjar. And I kind of left it at that, because he was telling me about the guy at the front gate. Looking back, he was describing Shirdi Baba. But I didn't know who Shirdi Baba was or Sathya Sai at that time. And I thought, boy, this is a fascinating story. But I filed it away, and this was in 1979. And about a year later, we left Saudi Arabia and came back, traveled different places in the world for different jobs, and eventually we landed in Atlanta. Maybe late 1986, early 1986. We got really spiritual. We don't know what bit us. And we started reading and buying books and renting tapes. We joined Unity, and we rented different videotapes every week. We'd watch something spiritual. And Unity is supposed to be the kind of church that accepts all religions, but they do lean Christian very, very heavily. So we were reading all these things, and one day I checked out a tape by Richard Bach. It was called The Lost Years of Jesus. And I said, boy, this is interesting. Let's watch this. So I was playing the tape, and Barry was fixing dinner. And at the very end of the tape, Richard Bach said, and there's this holy man in India. And I said, well, that's interesting. And here comes Swami. orange robe, space between his teeth, mole on his cheek, lots of hair. I said, well, this is the guy that Banjar was telling me about. I yelled to my wife, I said, this is it. And she said, this is what? And I came out. We played it over and over. And Banjar also told me he would give people small gifts. And here's Swami waving his hand and giving people vibhuti in the darshan line. And I thought, this is it. So I went back. We watched that over and over. And I went back to the bookstore at Unity Church. And I said, Sarah, at the end of this tape, there was a holy man called Sathya Sai Baba. Do you have any more information on him? Never heard of him. She says, I never even watched this tape. I said, okay, I'll find him. Don't worry. And I said, I'm going to get another tape to check out, and then I'm going to go home. She said, okay. So I was looking at the shelf where all the tapes were that I wanted to look at. And guess what? A tape almost fell on me. It came out, and it was called In Light of Prophecy, Sathya Sai Baba. There it was. Everything was in there, all these prophecies, and it was also, I believe, by Richard Bach. And all these prophecies, including the ocean of light, which is what Banjar described to me in Riyadh. And they even had other stuff in there that Banjar either forgot and didn't know, was his followers would have dots on their forehead. That's the tip-off that it's India. And of course Richard Bach said it was India. And now I said to Sarah, after I told her about this tape that I just found off the shelf, she said, where'd you get this? I said, it was on the shelf. She says, I never bought this tape. She looked it up in her log, and she said, it's my handwriting, but nobody's ever checked it out. Okay, take it. So I took the tape, and then I brought it back, and of course, she didn't know anything new from the last time, so we were left trying to figure out where we were going to go to find more information. So back then, there was a bookstore called Oxford Bookstore, and there was a huge used bookstore and a huge store, still longer in business. We said, maybe they'll have something. So we went in there and looked up in their catalog. They had one book about Sathya Sai Baba by Phyllis Crystal, The Ultimate Experience. Of course, it was under the fiction section, which we found humorous. And we bought the one copy they had, and the next day all we did was fight over who was going to read it, because it was so fascinating. Well, we both read that one book in one day. Now we're hooked. But there was a vital mistake made in the back of the book, because now we knew where he was. A Tustin bookstore put their stamp in the back and their phone number. So now I had it made. All I have to do is call them and find out where to go from here. So we called the Tustin bookstore, and I got an answering machine. Nobody was in the office. I left a message. In the meantime, we had already planned a trip to Florida for the weekend. So we drove down to Florida. We were thinking about Swami the whole time. We said, boy, this is fascinating. We hope to hear back from Tustin one of these days. And it started raining in Florida. And the forecast was rain for the next 3 days. So I said to my wife, Birgit, I said, let's just go back home and forget this. Why are we paying money to sit in the rain? We can do that in Atlanta. This was Saturday night. We got home. It was really late. It was like 10 o'clock at night. And I noticed the answering machine was blinking. So we listened to the message, and it was Tustin Bookstore. Oh, yes, there's a center in Atlanta. Here's their phone number. And go see what you think. And give them a call. And the guy you want to talk to is Tom Cross. So we called him. And my wife's saying, what are you doing? It's 10 o'clock. I said, it doesn't matter. This is important. She said, okay, do what you want, but it's too late to call somebody. So I called him up, and I said, I'm sorry, but I know it's late. He said, what's this about? And I said, this is about Sathya Sai Baba. He says, it's not too late. I'll talk about him anytime. I said, okay. I heard you have a center there. He says, as a matter of fact, tomorrow we're going to have what we call bhajans, which is kind of a spiritual program. And we're going to sing to him and discuss him and things like that. And I said, good, can we come? He says, no. I said, what do you mean, no? He said, well, you know, you have to be kind of immersed in this stuff first. We have to kind of guide you and give you some information on it. I said, well, I've been to India 2 or 3 times in my travels. He said, have you been there to see him? I said, no, but I never heard of him until just recently. He said, well, that's okay. You've been to India? Come on down. What time? He said, I think it was 10 o'clock. We came in. It was at Linda's house downtown. We walked in, and about 2 hours later, we were hooked. And we've been hooked now for 33 years. And we haven't looked back. And then I had some challenging times. I was in a car wreck and so on and so forth, which set our trip to India back. But in 1991, we made our first trip to see Swami. And I'll never forget, he came out and the light was glistening off his hair. And that's my trip full circle. Saudi Arabia, Atlanta, India. And we've been devotees ever since.
Jai Sai.